Hello, I'm Marcus Alton from the tribute website brianclough.com, and coming soon on The Green Jumper, my guest is legendary sports broadcaster Gary Newbon. The list of people he's interviewed reads like a who's who of sport, all documented in his new book. But where does Brian Clough rank amongst them all?
At the top, I've interviewed Muhammad Ali 3 times, Pele at 7 different World Cups that I attended, Olympic stars, Carl Lewis, all sorts of, you name them, and over the years I've interviewed them. Clough is the number one, and I've said that in my book, and I decided with this book, Newbon Bloody Hell, which is named after a famous interview that I did with Sir Alex Ferguson, when he said football bloody hell. I decided that the first 2 chapters would be 1 about Clough and 2 about Sir Alex Ferguson, and then get into my story. Because my business has always been about interviewing or presenting big shows, but interviewing big stars. And, you know, in a way, they're more important than I am.
There's also the story of when Gary introduced Cloughie to his dad before a European Cup match.
I invited my dad because I was doing it for ITV, the interviews, and I sort of said to Dad, do you want to come and sit with me? And he said, oh yeah, I'd love to. So before the match, I introduced him to Brian Clough, who was his normal charming self. And after the match, Clough walked past me and said, hey, come with me. And I started walking towards the dressing room. He said, no, not you, your dad. Come on, Jack. I introduced him, he remembered his name. And he took my dad in there. And my dad was introduced to all the players. He was looking at these signs. Cloughie was explaining, football, his football sayings like the greatest crime in football is to give the ball away. And another one that said, God didn't invent grass to play football in the air, and things like that. My dad was fascinated. And he asked my dad about his career and about his business that he built up with my mother. And I was getting very worried because we were getting near the deadline now. And I thought, oh my goodness, am I going to get this on air on Midweek Sports Special? And suddenly he came out and he turned around to my dad and said, Jack, we've got to do some work now with your son. And he turned to me and he said, by the way, Gary, I much prefer your father to you. You know, my dad, who was 5'7", was about 6'2" by this stage. Oh. And I was really grateful to Cloughie for doing that. It meant so much to my dad. It meant so much to me as well. Yeah. Soft thing, silly thing, but one of those things that is important in family life.
When it comes to classic Clough quotes, I hope anybody's not stupid enough to forget Gary's interview with Brian after a 6-goal thriller in the European Cup semi-final first leg against Cologne.
So it was 3-3, and I thought, well, they've done it now. They're not going to win in Cologne, probably. And those 3 away goals, they counted when the scores were level after 2 legs. Anyway, I sort of put it to Brian, and he said, I hope nobody is silly enough to write us off. And anyway, after the return match, when they won 1-0, Ian Bowyer scoring the goal that put them in the final, the 1-0 win in Cologne, Cloughie, after the match, was walking around the track. There was an athletics track around the pitch on his own, and he called me over and said, hey, come here. Now then, and he put his arm through mine and walked me around. He said, when we drew 3-3 at our place, and I said, I hope nobody's silly enough to write us off, and you dropped your microphone, and Brian Moore fell off his stool in London in the studio. You know what I mean now. And I'll see you at the airport. Good luck. Get off. And that was me put in my place.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Hello there. My name's Gary Newbon. Brian Clough was really important in my career. I interviewed him so many times. I've interviewed the greats over the years, but Cloughie is number one. So make sure that you stay with us on the Green Jumper podcast with Marcus Alton.
We'll also talk about the time Gary received a memorable Clough kiss caught on camera after Brian kept his word to give an instant post-match interview despite his side losing heavily just a few days before a League Cup final.
Well, they lost 4-0 or whatever it was, and I thought, oh, God. And Trevor East, the editor, is saying, are you sure you're going to get him? Yeah, he'll definitely do it. He always keeps his word, which he did. So anyway, he comes over to me, and I thought, I've got to make this easy. So I said, did you play badly because in 10 days' time you're at Wembley for the Football League Cup final? No, only Albert is sure of his place on the coach to Wembley. Well, having done my homework, as I always did, they didn't have an Albert. So I said, we haven't got an Albert. Yes, we have. He's the driver. Oh, no. There were 11 million people watching this interview, and
Yeah.
I lost my cool strangely, which I don't normally do that. But I was a bit stung, so I got a bit aggressive, and I pushed him, and then I went over the limit. I mean, everyone's screaming at me, and Cloughie knew that the floor manager, Stan Harding, was going potty, pushing me and shut up sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Cloughie got out of it because I'd said, why were you so bad? I'm getting to this stage now. And he said, because our lot are a bunch of pansies like you and me, and grabbed me and gave me this huge kiss. And unfortunately, there is a shot of me all over the place. It completely threw me. And then the press were ordered by their sports editors who'd been watching it live in London to come around and ask me if he'd been drinking. And he hadn't. And they came round and I said, was he drinking? I said, no, he just loves me, you see. But apparently I did find out later that Northern comedians were giving a rather cruder version, which I wouldn't dream of saying on your podcast.
No. Well, that did show another softer side of him, I suppose. And you saw that again, I think, many years later when you suffered a stroke. I think about 2002.
Yeah, it was, Marcus, 2002, February the 2nd. I'll never forget it. I had a stroke. I was about to cover the Manchester United match. I had one or two warnings and I thought I could shake it off. My wife had pleaded me not to go and do the Manchester United game. So I compromised, went up on the train and stayed in the Lowry. I felt a bit rough the night before, but, because I was stupid, I thought I could shake it off. Anyway, the next day, I'm all over the place. I've lost the room. I'm feeling sick. I knew I'm in trouble. So I rang Jeff Farmer and I said, look, I can't do the program. I'm ill. And he knew that if I was missing a program, I was really ill. I got a driver called Archie that looked after us to drive me back. I had the stroke while I was asleep in the car. To cut a long story short, I recovered. I was very lucky. I'd lost everything, but by the time I got home, speech, side of my body, I got it all back without an operation. They thought I'd need a big bypass. When I'm recovering, when I got home after a week in a private hospital, there was a letter from Brian Clough, and he didn't write that many letters. We just said, get well soon. We love you, Barbara and Brian Clough. And I've still got that, and it's something I'll treasure for the rest of my days.
Gary's new book, looking back at his broadcasting career spanning 50 years, is out now. Just search Gary Newbon book. And my latest paperback, Brian Clough, The Lost Tapes, is also available at the Tribute website, brianclough.com, and I can sign it personally for you too. Thanks for your company. I hope you can join me again soon for more memories of the great man in the green jumper.